Hello students, in this video we're going to actually build the counter that we mentioned in a previous video when we were just having a tour of the MakeCode site. So this is the blank project that I started earlier. If you haven't got a project ready to go and you don't know how to do that, you might need to go back and watch the previous video. Before we go into actually creating something in the site here, we need to understand what it is that we would like to create. So here I have a document, very simple one, that describes what it is that we are being asked to create. So this is essentially my planning document at this point. So I've been asked to make a counter, and it needs to be a device that can be used by a person manning a door to keep track of how many people are currently in the room or building. So that's something, unfortunately, that's very important these days for people to be able to keep track of how many people are going in and out of a business or a school, for example. And it's quite a common thing to see. The requirements, when we thought through this carefully, are that we need to be able to increase the counter by one at a time as a person enters. We then need to be able to decrease that same counter by one as a person exits. We need to be able to show the current counter total when needed, and this is an important point to realize. And we also need to be able to clear the counter back to 0. So let's look at these just a little bit more. We need an easy way to increase the counter and decrease the counter. That's the most basic part of what this counter needs to do. So they should be fairly straightforward. We need to be able to show the current counter when needed. So we could, for example, every time we increase the counter or decrease the counter, automatically show the total. But what we'd probably find if we tried that is would make it very slow to use, because we'd have to wait for every single time we increase or decrease to see the total, and then we have to decide how do we see it again later on if someone says, hey, how many people are there right now? So this when needed is a very, very important part of this design. And the other part, being able to clear it back to 0, is also something we need to think carefully about, because of course we don't want that to happen too easily. For example, we don't want a really, really easy button that you might accidentally press instead of increasing or decreasing that would automatically set it back to 0. So we have to think carefully about how we're going to do this. The programming is probably not hard, but we have to think about how we're going to implement it so that it doesn't happen accidentally, because that would be pretty bad to be counting all those people and have to go inside and say, hey, everyone, stop what you're doing so I can count you again because I've accidentally cleared my counter. So we do have to think carefully about how we implement this. So let's go back to the MakeCode site now and have a look at how we would actually do this. So the first thing we're going to think about is we need to keep track of a number. So we've done enough programming by now to know that to keep track of something, we need a variable. So I'm going to create a variable here. I'm just going to call it count. Very, very simple. As we know, names of variables don't really matter, but we always try and pick something that helps us to remember what that variable is representing. So we're going to pick something that makes sense here. And I'm going to set my counter to 0. Now, if you haven't done much with the microbit yet, let's quickly talk about this on start. So this is a special routine, if you like, that happens when the microbit first gets power. So when it's first started up. So it makes sense that when we first turn it on, that we set our microbit counter, the count that we've just created, to be equal to 0. It's first been turned on, it's equal to 0. And that works really well. Now, if we have a look over here at our simulator, we can see nothing happening. Okay, it's been turned on and our counter is 0, but of course, we're not seeing anything yet. Let's have a think about that. Let's have a look at this microbit again. I'm not sure how much you've looked at the microbits by this stage, but basically there are two buttons. There's an A button and a B button that you can press. You can also press them together, which we call A plus B. You can do things like shake the microbit. You can tilt it different ways, left, right, up, down. You can technically drop it, although I don't encourage that because you might break it. You can put things on these little dots, which is a little LED screen, so you can scroll numbers and letters across here. You can't play sound with it like it is here, although we can in the simulator, but you can connect a little speaker to these ground and 0 pins here if you wanted to create sound, little beeps and things like that. But it's quite powerful the way it is now. So what I'm thinking for this design is we're going to use the A button to increase our counter and the B button to decrease it. So that's a pretty straightforward thing. We're going to go to the input tag, which makes sense if you think about it. We're going to put some input, which is when we press a button, and we can straight away see we've got this on button A pressed. Now you'll notice it's not an on button B or anything because it uses this drop down to change the value. So let's just bring one of those out, and we can see that if we do the drop down, you can see there's an a B, and an AB. Okay? So on button A, we want to change this counter to increase by 1. So let's again use our variable, and we remember we've got this type of command which lets us change the value of variable by some amount. So we can simply put that in there. So when we press A, it'll increase whatever the current counter is by the value 1. So it'll add 1 to the counter. Now if you think about it, we want to do the reverse of that for the B. We want to decrease it by 1. So we could go back to input and drag one out and everything like that, but let's be smart about it. Let's simply duplicate this block. Now you see it's gone all funny grayed out because it says, hey, you can't have 2 button A presses, but that's okay because we're going to quickly change this to be a button B press. And you can see it's come back properly. But it's still increasing it by 1. That's not what we want. We want to decrease it by 1. So we're simply going to change it by a negative amount. So we now have our A increasing the counter by 1 and our B decreasing it by 1. But again, if we look over here at our simulator, if we press the A button, nothing seems to happen. B button, nothing seems to happen because we are not showing that value. So let's again think about how we can do this. We could maybe go, hey, let's just use the same thing again and we'll use that AB. And there is nothing wrong with that, except I want to do it a bit differently. Because I want to keep the A and B for reset, because it's going to be a lot harder to accidentally press both buttons together to reset it than anything else. So I'm going to try a different option. So I'm going to get rid of that for a second. Still in input, I'm going to look at the next option, which is this shake option. So if I bring that out and have a look at all the different ways we can manipulate the microbit itself. So shake means a decent little shake, and this is where we can tilt it up and down and which way it's facing and all those sort of things. These are the ones that I don't like people to use, the 3G, 6G and 8G. That's how many G forces it takes to hit it, because you'll probably end up breaking it. So I prefer you don't use these. But the shake one I like. So I'm going to use the shake to show the number on the screen. So when I shake it, it'll show me how much my counter holds. So once I've got this input, I'm then going to go back to the basic and I'm going to use this show number. So this show number, if I drag it into here, will let me show a number on the screen, on this little LED screen made up of these little dots here. But I don't want to show the number 0. I want to show the value of this variable count that I've made. So like we've seen in other languages, we're going to simply drag that out and replace the number with the variable. So now what we have is our microbits reset, and look how now that I move around on it, it actually is wiggling, because now it realizes I'm starting to use some of these, so it's starting to let me tilt it around. And you also notice it's put a virtual button, a pretend button of shake there, because I can't really shake the pretend virtual one. But see what happened when I press shake? It has shown a 0, because when it first starts, it set the counter to 0 and we haven't pressed A or B yet. Well, let's try that. Let's press A a couple of times. It's 3 times. And now if I press the pretend shake button, look at that. It's showing 3. Let's go down by 1 and press shake again. It's showing 2. So you can see now our A and B buttons are working. We just needed a way to show the number on the screen. Now what happens if we get past the number 10? So do a few more on there and look what happens. It scrolls number across, because on this tiny, tiny screen, it can only show a single letter or a single number. So once it gets past 10, or if you're doing text or something that needs more than one character, it's going to have to automatically scroll it like that for you. So in theory, we've done 3 of the 4 requirements. We've got an increasing button, we've got a decreasing button, we've got a way to show it when we want to, we just need one more, which is to do the reset. So like I mentioned before, I want to use the A and B button together. So I'm going to go back to my input and get one more button. I'm going to change it to be the A and B together. And I'm not going to go and get anything extra because I've already got it here, this set count to 0 like I used at the start. So I'm just going to duplicate that bit and drag it in here. So now you can see it's resetting, and if you ever need to manually reset the simulation, you can press this little loopy icon here that resets it. Okay, so at the moment, if I press the shake button, I'm pretending to actually shake it, I've got 0 because it's just started. Add a few in, let's see, take one off just to see what it's doing. Yep, now if I do the AB, so again in real life you would press the two buttons at the same time, but on the simulation it's added an extra little pretend button, a bit like the shake. So if I press that AB, it set it back to 0, but it's still showing 4. If I press the shake button, it shows 0, so it has actually changed the value, but it's still always showing the last value on the screen. So maybe we want to also add the show number here after we reset it so that we can see that it has in fact done that. So let's do it again, chuck a few numbers in there. We'll show it. So we're showing 9 at the moment. Let's reset it. And there you go. It's showing 0 again. If we add one person back in, we're seeing 1. And technically we have now met all the requirements. There's one more thing I would like to do. I don't want to keep the number on the screen all the time, because if I look at this and go, oh, I'm going to put one more person in, I can't tell that necessarily. Now, I've got that because I actually shook it accidentally. So if I put a few more people in, it's not showing them until I press or do that shake. So what I'd like to do is when I show the number, I want to show it for a second on the screen, and then I want to clear the screen again. Okay. So in both the places where I'm doing that, which is the shake and after we reset it, I want to add a couple more commands. The first one I want to add is where's it gone? A pause. Okay. So just like we've seen in other programs, this pause basically stops the program going any further until this timer runs out. And just like in other areas we've looked at, it's in milliseconds. So we need 1,000 milliseconds, or in this case, it actually shows it as 1 second. And you can see there's the 1,000. So this is going to show the counter's number. Then it's going to wait for a second. And then I basically want to clear the screen. And again, in BASIC, there is a special command called clear screen. So let's have a look at that in practice. So if we reset, we put a few people in, let's see what it's showing. It's showing 6, and then it automatically cleared. So every time I press this shake, it shows the number for a second and clears it. So let's add the same to the reset. So all I need is this and this again. So let's duplicate this and put it at the bottom, and duplicate the clear screen and put it at the bottom. So again, we're going to reset the counter. We're going to show that we've reset it by showing the new value. We're still going to pause for a second, and then we're going to clear the screen again. So let's have a look at that in action. So here we go, put a few people in. What have we got? Yep, 9 people. Let's do the pretend AB to reset it. So we've shown that we've reset it to 0 and it's hidden again. So I think that makes it more functional because we don't have a number on the screen all the time that might be confusing. So we now have a fully functional counter that could be taken by somebody and actually used, because a microbit can be battery powered. We can put it in a little protective case so they don't touch the circuitry. And they could literally stand at a doorway and count people in. Yep, person, person, person. Oh, how many have we got? Let's have a look. There's 3 people. Oh, someone's just left. Yep, now we've got 2. Okay, we're finished for the day, or we've got everyone out. We need to reset quickly. Press that. There you go. So we have a fully working counter that could actually be used in real life. Now this, of course, is a very simple example, but it is a fully functional product. And there are these sort of devices actually being made and sold in the real world. And again, at the moment, they're very, very important and quite popular for people to buy. So maybe you've got a place that you might need to use something like this, maybe at a sports club, or mum or dad, if they run a business and they need to keep track. You might be able to say, hey, instead of going out and spending money on one, I can build you one. How about that? Remember to download, not just to rely on those tiles. So we're done with this now, or we're finished as much as we can for the moment. We're going to download, so we get the hex file come up. That's what we want to get. And now we're right to go back home. Remember, it is there, but we don't rely on these because they do often disappear.